Welcome, everyone. Glad to have you all here. We are going to have a really interesting panel discussion on the topic, the journey, navigating different stages of one's research career. We will discuss various issues and biases and questions that most of us encounter on our career paths. For those of you who want to ask questions, please use the SIGCOMM Slack channel, SIGCOMM'21-Journey panel. We will use the last 15 minutes of this hour for your questions posted on Slack. We have a very interesting and diverse set of panelists who are at different stages of their research career. Our first panelist is Professor Jim Kurozei. Professor Kurozei is a distinguished professor at UMass. From 2015 to 2019, he has served as Assistant Director at NSF, and in 2018, he was the Assistant Director for Artificial Intelligence in the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy. He received the IEEE Infocom Award, ACM SIGCOMM Lifetime Achievement Award, ACM SIGCOMM Test of Time Award, and IEEE CS Taylor Booth Education Medal. He is also the co-author of the best-selling textbook, Computer Networking, A Top-Down Approach. As a professor, he has graduated nearly 30 PhD students and has served as a department chair and dean. Our next panelist is Professor Olivier Bonaventure from UC Leuven, Belgium. Professor Bonaventure leads the IP Networking Lab and has contributed to the design, implementation, and deployment of several internet protocols, including LISP, multipath TCP, IPv6 segment routing, and many more. He served as editor for SIGCOMM CCR. He is also the author of Computer Networking, Principles, Protocols, and Practice, which is an open source ebook that is used by various universities. He also co-founded the Tessera spin-off that deploys hybrid access networks using multipath TCP. Our next panelist is Dr. Deepak Roshi, who is an assistant professor at UIUC. His research is focused on next generation networking system, which includes satellite networking, cellular networking, and in-body networks. His work has been featured in The Economist, IEEE Spectrum, BBC, MIT News, Daily Mail, and CBC, amongst others. His research on IoT systems for agriculture has been deployed across farms in the United States, India, and Africa. He is the inaugural Microsoft Research Fellow and a recipient of the ACM SIGCOMM Doctoral Dissertation Award, 2 Best Paper Awards, the Microsoft Research PhD Fellowship at IIT Delhi. Our next panelist is Dr. Yasmin Ghasumpur, who is an assistant professor at Princeton University. Her research includes next generation wireless communication and sensing systems, including millimeter wave and terahertz network. She received her PhD and master's degrees from Rice University. Dr. Yasmin is the recipient of 2020 Marconi Young Scholar Award and the runner-up of 2020 ACM SIG Mobile Dissertation Award. She has also been named an EECS Rising Star in 2019. Next up is Dr. Philip Ritter. Dr. Ritter is a senior research scientist with Akamai Technologies and a research affiliate at MIT. Before joining industry, he did a 2-year postdoc at MIT. He earned his PhD from TU Berlin, and during his time as a PhD student, he interned twice at ICSI in Berkeley and in Akamai. His research was awarded with the Best Paper Award at IMC 2016, a Distinguished Paper Award at IMC 2019, 2 Applied Networking Research Prizes in 2017 and 19, and selected Best of CCR in 2015. Our final panelist is Hannah B. Pasandi, who is currently a senior PhD student in Virginia Commonwealth University and soon to be a research scientist at LIG Lab. Her research interests include wireless communications with an emphasis on design and implementation of data-driven MAC protocols. She is also the co-organizer of this panel. A very warm welcome to all the panelists. Thank you so much for joining us today. I am Tanya Sridhar and I will be moderating this session. Without further ado, let's get started. I'm just going to stop sharing my screen so that we can all see our lovely panelists. Okay. So let's start with our first question. So our first question is something that concerns students who are interested in pursuing a PhD. What do you look at when a potential PhD candidate approaches you? Do you have any advice for students who are planning to pursue a PhD? Professor Kurozei, can you start this discussion?
Sure, I'd be happy to, Tanya. First, I want to say hi to everybody. I'm actually here at the SIGCOMM pod in the Boston area, and so we have folks from Northeastern BU, MIT, UMass, and probably some other schools. Those are just folks I've talked to here. So we wanted to say hi to everybody from the Mount Ida campus at UMass. I guess, and I wanted to thank you also for organizing the panel, you and the co-organizers. You know, you mentioned that you have a range of faculty and students here of different ages. So I think I must qualify as the old person here, but that's great. I will tell you again from 30 plus years of advising PhD students. I'll just answer your question quickly. You know, the thing I look for, obviously, we look for really talented students who have done well in their undergraduate program. But I think the most important thing is spark and drive, right? That, you'll get lots of students who come in with good grades in undergraduate courses, but, do they have that, first of all, that creative spark, and do they have sort of, I don't know, it's hard to define. It's almost like a brightness to them and a desire to really go out and do things and change the world. So those are the kinds of things. Obviously, the good grades, good letters of recommendation from people, some research experience, hopefully, but not always. But that spark, for me anyway, is critical.
Thank you so much for your answer. That's a really nice viewpoint. Professor Bonaventure, can you also share your viewpoints?
Olivier, you're muted.
Tanya, we may have lost Olivier. I don't see him on the panelist list anymore.
Yeah.
Oh, actually, I do see him now. Hey,
Professor. Okay.
Okay, do you hear me?
Yes,
Yep.
Yes, we do.
Okay, so in my university, most of the PhD students that I've advised are local students. So I see them during the undergrad studies, and I look at them, and when I see their progress as undergrad, and then I encourage them to do a master thesis. And if the master thesis works well, then I encourage them to do the PhD thesis. So mainly it's this way. So looking at how they do projects or they write code, because writing code is important as well in networking, how they can present their results and be able to express themselves and then be creative, as Jim said.
Thank you so much for your answer. Deepak and Yasman, you both are building your research groups. What do you look for potential PhD students?
Yes, Aman, do you want to go first?
Go ahead.
Yeah, so in my group, I think there is no one criteria to build a group. Because when you're building a group, you need people with different kind of skill sets, especially in interdisciplinary fields where you have you need someone to build the hardware and someone to work on the on the algorithmic side of things. So bit of it is about creating the balance. But from a student perspective, I think one of the main things is that there should be something that stands out. It could be that they've done really well academically, they have really strong letters, they have really strong research experience. So something has to stand out because like also like in CS, it's becoming very competitive these days to get a good PhD position. So I definitely look for something something to stand out. And then I also interview people because it's also about like how this person fits in the group, what their personal aspirations are, do they align with what I'm looking for. So that kind of fit is also important. So yeah, so basically that just like something to stand out and fit.
That's an excellent viewpoint.
I think I just second what Deepak said. I'll maybe add a few points. So of course they need to pass like the bar that we set for ourselves in terms of academic achievements, but also it's really important. It's really important for me, and I think it's really hard to kind of get this from the student in the interviews, that how organized they are in terms of forming their thoughts around like a new problem, right? And so this is something I've been taking advice from seniors in my field for how do you kind of recognize that in like a short 30-minute or I mean, even like 1 hour interview, how would you want to do that? And it's like, there is no secret sauce as far as I know. But I would say maybe that goes back to that brightness that was brought up. So when I'm asking you a question that you have no idea of, how would you form your thoughts around answering the question that's like well organized, makes sense? At least there's a path for you to follow and kind of get to the answer, even if you don't know the answer right away. And that's really important for me.
Thank you so much for this point. This is really an out of the box point, which most of us, when we are applying, we do miss this. Is there any other pointer and advices that the panelists want to add to this question?
Yeah, so one thing I would add is that once I've formulated a short list of candidates, I kind of spend time like thinking about it because you have to like I can only recruit one student, but every or like two students, but every year we have more than two students who are really good and are applying. And at that point, I do like reach out to like colleagues who've written letters for them and talk to them and figure out like more details about about the candidate. And probably I can do that like because I'm early in my career, so I have more time to vet the candidates. As I get busier, I may not be able to do that, but I do spend a lot of time. But from a student perspective, what they can optimize for is their research experience, grades, and trying to like work with people who can write good letters. And I think one thing for the community that sort of like really bugs me is that if an undergrad works with someone and they write like a 1-paragraph letter, I think that's really a disservice to the undergrad. So I would really encourage people like who write letters for undergrads for master students to come for apply for a PhD, to write like descriptive good letters that can excite us about the potential of the candidate.
That's really an interesting point. Thank you so much.
So I might add one more point, and that is that especially when you first come to a university and you're working with a faculty member, it doesn't mean like you're wed for life, right? So students change advisors just because they change interests or their better personality matches or interest matches. And so, you know, I just want to say, I don't think people should feel like, oh, I'm in a marriage forever with this person I'd never met before, and I just happen to be accepted into this university to work with this person. That students actually do change advisors, and that one good way, if you're in a university, to figure out if you've got a good match with an advisor, and for vice versa, is to take you know, at UMass, we call them 791 reading courses, where you read journal papers in the class and you talk and you do a class project together, right? I mean, I can count at least a half a dozen students who I first met through these seminar reading courses, and what they started as a class project ended up being part of their thesis.
So that's a really important point. So you want to say that students should emphasize on the courses that they take in the first year, and they should broaden their horizon. Okay, so we'll go to the next question now. So our next question is a really an interesting one, especially from a PhD candidate's perspective. So how should a new PhD student prepare for a successful research career? So what tips do you have? For example, how to pick a research topic or how to strike a balance between teaching and research activities? Here we are essentially looking at different perspectives, both as an advisor and as a student from the panel. Does anybody want to pick this one up?
Yeah, I think I go first. So as a PhD student, you need to balance between your coursework, especially at the beginning of your PhD, and other activities. And sometimes there are some opportunities that they come up, but think it twice because you need to focus on your final goal and see whether this opportunity helps or not. And you know, sometimes there are people that they ask you to do something, like they ask you to do a service, like review a paper or organize an event. So you don't have to say yes all the time. So it's better to say no sometimes, especially learning to say no at the early stages of your PhD. And yeah, that's the points I think that are important.
Thank you so much, Hannah, for sharing your experience as a PhD student. So Philip, what was your strategy in your PhD?
So I'm not sure I can like lay out an entire strategy, but I think I do have like maybe one or two pieces of advice that can help, especially in the beginning. One is one where I was like fortunate enough to have an advisor who really enforced this, and that is that kind of like get your research written up early and do have the courage kind of to also go out there and maybe submit your, even if it is early stage work, write it up, get it out there and get feedback on it. Don't get stuck in this loop of, you know, kind of, we could improve this a little more. And at the end of the day, doing the research is one thing, but then really communicating it out and getting feedback on it is the other one. And I think that would have saved a lot of people, myself and a lot of people around me, a couple of cycles in terms of time, if they would have done it earlier. And there will be rejection, right? And that's painful. If you do submit more papers, you will get more papers rejected. But the sooner that happens, and the sooner you get used to that, the better off you will be. So I think that's kind of actually my main advice. With regards to choosing a topic, I think that's a difficult question. There are lots of factors at play, but I have one thought there also, just from my experience and seeing students in various institutions. Whatever topic you choose, I think it should be a topic that either your advisor directly or another, maybe a senior student or a postdoc or somebody around you cares about. So don't be that person working somewhere in a dark room on something where you basically don't have a network around you that can support you.
Right. These are actually both very excellent points. I personally also agree with them. Professor Kurozei, what is your advice to the students given your vast experience with so many PhD students?
I think he might be auto days.
Sorry, I had to get a plug, so to plug in my Mac in just a second. Maybe I'll make a couple of comments. You know, Hannah brought up the issue of time management, and that was one of the questions and prompts you asked us about. You know, I think that's incredibly important. Learning how to say no is an incredibly important skill. It's part of the basics of time management. I would also say when you make a commitment to do something, follow through on it and do absolutely the best you can. If you overcommit, then there's not enough time to do things, and then you end up doing a lot of things poorly as opposed to a smaller number of things really greatly. And that's true for in lots of different dimensions. You know, I really liked what Philip said about writing up your work and intentionally getting it out early. I think that's really good advice. You know, maybe one piece of advice I'll share that I share with my students and other students of other faculty members I know and that I practiced is if you're a student, you have to learn how to manage your advisor, right? So when you start off, you figure like, oh, my advisor's going to tell me everything, but your advisor's doing a bazillion things and probably doesn't know enough about time management. It occurred to me sort of late in my graduate student career that I had to keep my advisors focused on what I wanted them to pay attention to. And so I would start showing up with, I'm not sure PowerPoint existed at the time, but the equivalent of PowerPoint slides, and saying, this is what I really want to talk to you about today. And my more senior students, I realized, and then some of them actually told me that it was an important skill for them to learn how to manage me. And when students say that, they're far enough along that they really sort of understand how to do things, and they've sort of, it's sort of like a guild, right? You've been an apprentice, and if you're at the level where you can now manage your advisor, you're probably pretty ready to go out and work on your own and do things.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. Professor Bonaventure, do you have any pointers for our audience?
Yeah, maybe I would say for the advisors, when a new PhD student starts, it's important to try to give to these new PhD students goals that are achievable. So it's important you can start from let's say a poster session, and then try to go to a workshop paper, then to a conference paper. And a new student doesn't need to be involved immediately in a top conference or something very, very high bar, where he could have issues to achieve that goal. So it's important to show that he can succeed or she can succeed, and then build upon the success that she has gone. And second issue is that I think it's useful to let the students work in groups of a few students, so that they are not alone and they can discuss with others. So as an advisor, if you want to work on 3 different topics and you have 3 students, I'm not sure it's a good idea. So it's better to have 1 or 2 topics and then try to share them among the students, so that at least they can share expertise in tools, expertise in reading papers, the conference where they submit, and things like that. So there is some cross-fertilization among the students, because the advisor will not always be available and will not be able to always direct the students. And it's important for the students to be able to discuss with fellow students who have other ideas. So if you can have a team where you have young students with a bit more experience, and then more experienced students, then you have a kind of pipeline that automatically improves itself, and then the older students train partially the younger ones. But then you need to build a pipeline. So if you start as an advisor, it can be a good idea to hire a postdoc as well as a PhD student, so that the postdoc can also participate in the training of the young student.
That's an excellent viewpoint.
Yeah, I totally, as a PhD student, agree with Professor Bonaventure. I really think these small progresses, for example, starting from poster, then to a workshop paper, then then to a maybe full conference paper, can really boost your confidence. And also, as Philip said, you can get early feedback about your research, which is very important. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yasman, do you have any secret mantras that you would like to share with our audience that helped you during your PhD?
Yeah, sure. So I want to kind of give another perspective and tell you what not to do. Yes, I'm telling you what to do. So I would say, so I'm seeing around myself, like in my PhD school and also here, like many first-year PhD students tend to choose a topic that's kind of hot right now, whatever that means. Then meaning that, so they see like everyone else is working on this, or this is something that they heard like it's hot, so okay, I'm gonna jump on it, right? But then they don't have that perspective of like a senior like academics saying that, oh, these are like peaks and dips in the cycle, and maybe you enter it exactly at the peak, but there's a dip coming down the road, right? So I would say talk to other folks that are more senior than that can help you a lot in terms of gaining that perspective. Same applies to choosing your advisor. Don't choose an advisor because you basically know their names, or because you kind of had a course with them or know their textbook, for example. It's just sometimes that chemistry doesn't work out, and you might be the best student in the world, and that must be best advisor in the world, but this doesn't work out, right? So I would say be engaged, or go in there, attend the group meetings, have one-on-one interactions, and try to have a more sort of kind of better decision in terms of considering all the aspects together. One last point, as kind of connected to what everyone also was saying about kind of smaller steps of success, is I think coming from the fact that when we're in undergrads, we have a measure of success, and that's our grades at the end of the semester, right? But then as soon as you enter your PhD, no one cares about your grades anymore, and you don't have any sort of measure of kind of following, or am I on the right track or not, right? And then that's why you might getting stuck in the loop of what I call like perfectionism, meaning that you just want to say read all the papers in the board on TPC topic, right? And then, oh, now I can contribute something in this topic. And then you may be in this loop forever, or like a year, or like 6 months. Like it's still long, too long, right? So just sitting in your room and trying to be perfect in one topic, right? But then if you have a small goals along the road, then that helps you kind of see a better sort of vision about what's going on, and kind of don't get stuck along the way. That's all from myself.
And I'd like to put an exclamation point behind something that Yazaman said, and that is going out and talking to other people, and sort of being part of a larger community, and sort of understanding and integrating a lot of different viewpoints on what are interesting topics to work on and what topics people are going to. So, you know, somebody earlier said, you don't want to be the person sitting in the room all by yourself, right? So know what's going on in the community. Everybody here is by definition participating in SIGCOMM, so that's great, right? But there are lots of other conferences and workshops to go to, and so I also encourage people to do that, to get that perspective that Yazaman was talking about.
Yeah, that's a great point, actually. So Deepak, do you want to chime in?
Yeah, I'll quickly just like re-stress what Yazaman said about like coming from an undergrad and lacking this constant feedback, because so I want to build on that in terms of work ethic. So as undergrads, typically our work ethic is sprint based, that we have an exam, we'll study for like 2 days, and then we'll like relax for a week. Systems research does not really work like that. It is more like a marathon. You have to like show up every day and do a little bit, and keep doing that for a year till you build like something large that's like worth like presenting it to someone else. So a bit of this is about building the work ethic. And I think the other point I wanted to add was to see the PhD as a journey of self-improvement, that in your first year, you will lack several skills that a good researcher should have, and that is okay. But you have to constantly be observant of like how you will build those skills as you go forwards. It might be writing, it might be the work ethic, it might be just doing research, like any kind of skill that you feel you're missing is okay, right? Like at the beginning of your PhD, as long as you're willing to work on that and build it as you go forward.
Thank you so much. That really sums it up. Now we move to our next question. A question that concerns all PhD students that will be soon on the job market. So how to decide which path to choose after PhD? How to choose between industry and academia? So we would like to hear panelists' personal experiences that help them decide their career trajectory. And I want to start this question with Philip, as you have had both postdoc and industrial research experience.
All right, so yeah, that's, I mean, I'm just going to be completely honest here, just speaking for myself. I think for me, the situation was that towards the end of my PhD, I did not have a clear path in mind. So I was not decided, do I want to be like become a professor, or do I want to join industry? And that is also the reason for why I went for a postdoc. And during the postdoc, I realized that a bunch of other postdocs around me were way more determined to become a professor than I was. And so that basically then, at the same time during my postdoc, I had the opportunity to collaborate with industry more closely. And then kind of one thing came to the other. And for me, then the solution was that I then made the decision to not pursue like applying for a faculty position, which I don't regret at this point. I mean, let's see. It's every career path is it's kind of long and windy, right? So let's see what the future will bring. And another thing that I also want to mention here that was important for me, I mean, it's not just the factor, hey, is it industry or is it academia? Because I think in both instances you will have some sort of overlap, right? So for example, I mean, I have the chance right now, I'm still affiliated with MIT. I'm able to contribute here a little bit to SIGCOMM, and in many industry positions, you will be able to negotiate such things. And on the other hand, I would assume if you're in academia, you can cooperate with industry. And then there are other factors like personal things, right? For example, location. So for me, it was important. I realized, especially from living abroad, that location matters to me, and I wanted to be able to move back to Berlin, where I'm like right now. And my company offered me that, and I don't think that would have been possible, for example, with a faculty on the faculty market. So, and I don't know, my advice there would kind of just be that if you have also other factors that are important to you, for example, location, but could be a bunch of other things, then maybe make a list and just judge for yourself, like what are the really important factors at play for your individual situation.
That's a really nice answer. I have a follow-up question. So do you have any tips for landing an industrial position that you would like to share with the audience?
So I think overall, I mean, if you look at the websites of numerous companies, many of them have many open job openings. So I don't think that there's really a shortage in positions in general. I think the challenge will rather be whether it is a position that will kind of suit you, especially if you still want to work in research. And then the question will be kind of how much that company that you're joining can allow you to do that, or what kind of well, basically the terms of your kind of employment agreement. So in that sense, I mean, in my case, I found my position because I started collaborating with folks before that in the group that I'm now in, and I met them at a conference. So it's basically just kind of a follow-up of what we just discussed also in the beginning of the panel. So for me, this worked nicely. So if you can do that, that's great. If you can start building these relationships early. But honestly, I think even if you approach, for example, also like SIGCOMM has lots of different sponsors, right? And they have their own like sessions where you can join, and I think it might be worthwhile just joining in there and speaking with some folks. And yeah, and maybe one other thing, if you decide to go into industry, don't expect them, for most companies, to care too much whether you have a PhD or not, and maybe also not whether you have a lot of papers or not. So having a PhD makes you probably like a good problem solver, and that's what they would care about, like whether you can solve problems, but maybe not so much for your kind of academic credentials that you worked very hard for during your PhD.
That's an excellent point. Deepak, given your industry experience, would you like to add to this?
Sure. Yeah. So my experience was kind of like a reverse of what Philip had. So after my PhD, I deferred my faculty position to work for a couple of years at Microsoft Research, and I had a lovely experience like in academia and in industry. I would just say that both of these places are sort of optimizing for different kind of impact of your work. And in the industry, you have a more direct impact, and the scale of that impact is pretty big. For example, for the agriculture project, I can point out that this is a product that I contributed to. So many people use it. But in academia, the impact is more more idea levels, right? And by the time it actually sees the light of the day, it has been built upon and it has changed shape so many times that it's kind of hard to pinpoint like what impact your work has caused, right? It's kind of like more fundamental at the same time. It's like more intangible. So there are different kinds of impact and different scales at the same time. But the other factor that sort of is crucial in academia is that you have more flexibility in the problems you choose, and you get to work with students. I think the students are probably the most interesting part of academia for me, that I get to work with them, I get to mentor them. It's very satisfying. But I would say that both of them are really great career paths, especially given that there is like so much like interest in the industry in like in the CS or like in the networking space in the industry these days, that both of these opportunities are almost like equal. It just depends on your like personal biases, right? What kind of impact you prefer, as Philip mentioned, that, or do I prefer to be in a good location versus, you know, like Champaign where I am. So so it just depends. Yeah.
Thank you. That really sums it up. Yasaman, can you share your thought process when you were making this decision? Also, do you have any tips for the academic job market and the process for fresh PhD graduates?
Yeah, sure. So this can be a topic of a panel by itself. So these questions are really important that have been discussed a lot before. So maybe just if I want to briefly explain, I would say I don't see like being a professor is that much different from building a company, not being an employee of a company, meaning that you have to raise funding, you have to kind of hire students, you have to kind of have a little bit of marketing, know how to present your ideas, of course, in the form of papers or talks, presentations, right? So it's kind of like starting your own company, but it's just a one-man job, meaning that you are doing everything by yourself, at least for the first few years, right? Until you make a pipeline, you have like an army of students and postdocs, then it feels like an actual startup, right? So if you enjoy that kind of work and you enjoy that sort of that kind of challenges to deal with, then I would definitely say academia is the way to go. But you have to kind of try it out a little bit at your PhD, meaning that you should help your advisor with proposal writing, see if at all you're enjoying that. You should go give talks. You should try to mentor your like junior students in the lab. You try to see if you are like, these are the big components, right? You can volunteer to teach a course, or at least like be a co-instructor of a course at your institution and see if you are enjoying it, right? So these are all like kind of the key components that you can try. On the other side, you can kind of go for internships during summer, and I highly recommend that for all PhD students to try like maybe big companies as well as research labs doing internships during their PhDs. And then you kind of have all the data that you need to make a decision for yourself. And of course, there is no best decision. And there are a lot of personal factors like location that was brought up, and kind of balancing out like work versus personal life. Of course, Deepak knows what I'm saying. So it's like a lot of kind of late night works during weekends, like at least at the beginning of your career in academia. So yeah, so these are all like personal factors that you need to consider when you are making a decision.
Thank you so much for this answer. Now I would like to.
So
yeah,
I just,
go ahead.
As Yasaman said, I think this question by itself can be a panel topic, and it was discussed before. But from a senior PhD student point of view, if I would like to add some tips for people who are preparing to go to the job market, for example, in academic field, you know, one thing that I would suggest, invite yourself, actually ask people to give talks, so you would be better when you are, giving your interviews and your job talks at real time. And the other point is start early, and I think apply as much as you can. So if you have an opportunity to, apply somewhere, just apply. Don't be that selective. Yeah.
Thank you, Hannah, for these excellent points. I would now like to ask our senior professors about the importance of postdoc if one wants to start an academic career. Professor Kurozei, do you want to take this one?
No, actually, I'd like to answer. I want to just make a couple of comments on the last one, and then
yeah, sure, sorry.
If you want, I'd be happy to talk about postdocs. But again, I want to put an exclamation point behind a couple of things that Yazaman said. She said, "Try it out," right? And I was working in a research lab with just like the best in the world people while I was doing my PhD. And then I taught a course, right? And I just fell in love with it, right? And so when I went applying for jobs, I didn't even look in industry because I knew I wanted to teach because I just absolutely love doing that. And so, people always tell you, your parents will always tell you, do what you love, right? And so if you want to find out what you love, you've got to try it, right? That's what Yazaman was saying. So, make sure you do an internship, really get a chance to try to teach a course if you can. I mean, with some of my students, we've co-taught courses together. Even though I'm the instructor of record, they would teach, half of the classes, which is great by me, and they get some experience, and it all works out well. The one other thing I wanted to say is, we've lumped academia as one big thing, right? And looking at all of you here on our panel, we're all at what are called R1 universities, super research intensive universities, right? But there are other universities that have more of a balance between research and teaching. And then, in the US, we have liberal arts schools that are four-year colleges that are really, that have fabulous undergrad students there. And the focus is primarily on teaching. And so, find, if you love to teach, you can, for me, it was trying to wrestle. I thought, I love teaching so much. I want to go to a four-year college, but there's not as much of an emphasis as on research there. And so, there's no value judgment on any of that. Hannah just said, do the things that you enjoy doing. So if you enjoy teaching, there's a whole range of things you can do. You don't have to just think about being a little me of your advisor, right? And we're all at R1 universities. There's lots of opportunities.
Yeah, that's a great answer. One should always follow the passion. Professor Bonaventure, do you want to add to this? Do you want to share your experience?
Oh, but I agree with Jim. I was willing to say the same. So if you want to go to academia, you need to love teaching. If you don't love teaching, then don't go to academia because you will be disappointed. And looking at what Deepak said at the beginning, where he mentioned that in industry, you can have impact. I think that in academia, you have different impact because you have impact on the students themselves, because you can train lots of students. And so this is another form of impact, but this is an important impact as well. And so if you are passionate about that, then go to academia.
That's absolutely correct. That sums it up. Also, I would want to ask the importance of postdoc if one wants to start an academic career. What's your opinion on
that? I would say that unfortunately we are putting too much importance on postdocs, and we are asking people to move around and to go to multiple universities before having a tenure track position and before settling down. I don't think that's a good idea. I think it's a good idea that people try different research lab and have experience in different locations. But it's not a good idea to ask people to do 3, 4, 5 different postdocs before they get a tenured position. And we are not doing a good service to the community by asking professors to just travel for 10 years before they get a professor position. And this is really bad for academia. I think we should be faster in hiring, and maybe some researchers should understand that they don't want to go in academia because the number of places is limited, and they should go to industry or create their own company, because we mentioned large companies that have research lab, but starting a company is also fun, and it's a kind of I think it's one mentioned that being a lab, creating a new lab is kind of building a company, and you could create a company and have impact with a company as well. And this is another direction which is a bit different from research, because you have to talk to the clients and the customers that will buy your stuff. But this is interesting as well, and you learn a lot by doing that.
That's a great viewpoint.
Yeah.
Professor Kurozei, do you share that?
Yeah, I wanted to emphasize something that Olivier just mentioned, that about doing too many postdocs, right? I think in some cases postdocs are great. So, we're an international group here. So, in Europe, for example, the PhDs tend to be significantly shorter, like half the time it takes in the United States. And so postdocs are much more common there than they are here in the United States, although they're more common here. To give you an idea of how bad things can go for a discipline, in the life sciences, the average age of your first NIH grant, think of like your career grant at NSF, is 42. I mean, can you imagine being 42 years old and you finally get your first grant on your own? I mean, think of all the things you've been doing between 21 and 42. I mean, it's like half your lifetime, and now you're just getting your first grant. So, I would say also postdocs can be great, but I hope as a discipline we don't go the way the life sciences have gone.
That's an excellent answer. Thank you so much. We'll move on to our next question. So our next question concerns people who have just started their careers as independent researchers, either as a faculty or in industry. So the question is how to be successful as an early stage independent researcher. What steps should be taken early on to ensure a smooth road ahead? We would like to hear your experiences and tips that personally worked for you. So Professor Kurozei, since you have mentored so many early stage researchers, do you have any tips you would like to share with the audience?
Well, before I share just one tip, I will say that I've given a talk actually at the student workshop at Connext and also at InfoComm about 10 things I wish my advisor had told me. And so you can search for that on some popular search engine and find it, I'm sure, or send me an email and I'll send it to you. And one of the points there is about mentoring and also role models. And so one thing I would encourage people to do, something I've always done in my career, and if you find my talk, you can see who my role models are. Identify role models. Look at people and say, oh, there's something that they do really well, right? There's not going to be, nobody walks on water and does everything perfectly, but somebody does something particularly well. Well, what is it that they do so well that you would like, and how do they go about doing that? And so I would say find role models, say, I want to be like that person. If you look at the pictures in mine, you'll recognize a lot of the people there probably. And I would say also get a mentor, right? There's a difference between a role model and a mentor. A role model could be something, you never even talk to, but you understand sort of how they're doing things. But a mentor is somebody local, or somebody that they don't have to be local, somebody you can talk to who'll be a bit of a shepherd for you as you get going. And I want to give a shout out to the SIGCOMM organizers for, trying to build in mentoring into this conference. And it's been done in the past with SIGCOMM. So I would say find role models and find a mentor.
Thank you. That's an excellent point. Professor Bonaventure, do you have any particular experience or an example that you would like to share with the audience?
I agree with Jim. But I would say that it's important to discuss with others. And so if you get an email from a master student saying that he has read your paper and he would like to do something with what you have proposed, then don't ignore this and try to build a community, and every opportunity you have of interacting with others. So do it. And if you release your code, you release your artifacts, you let others play with what you have done, and try to interact with them and encourage them to pursue the work. And so you can build a community. And what's important, and unfortunately we don't have conferences right now where we can discuss, but it's important that you build your own social network with other researchers. And so when you are at a real conference, I always tell to my PhD students that the most important part of the conference is the lunch. And when they go to lunch, they should find people that they don't know, and they should just sit and have lunch with them, even just to listen to what they are talking about. But they meet new people, and they should not stay with the students that they already know. For example, in my university, we speak French. And so typically the students from my university, they would go with the French-speaking people because this is easier. But then you always see the same French-speaking people, and the same is true for German-speaking and so on. But if you try to broaden your social network, then you will gain in the long term. So it's important to broaden your social network.
That's a really nice perspective. Thank you for sharing that. Deepak, Yasaman, and Philip, you recently started your journey as independent researchers. Can you share a few tips with the audience?
Yeah, it's kind of hard because we just started, so we don't know if this will work out well for us. But yeah, I think one thing that I want to bring back is what Hannah said earlier, that you have to learn to say no. And I haven't really learned to do it well. And as a result, I almost always end up having more deadlines than I can manage. And I guess like one thing that I'm doing differently from when I was a PhD student is that I'm sort of like not after perfectionism. So I'm letting like some deadlines not be my like best work, like not in terms of like not papers for sure, but other things that come up. For example, like I don't want like a report for something to be like really pretty. I'm okay with writing like a badly formatted report sometimes, because like that's what I can do. And yeah, basically that's what I've been trying to do. But I don't really know like what's a successful strategy, because we're just like going through it and trying to do it.
I'm interested in also knowing your viewpoint that should one continue with their PhD domain, or should one try to pivot to new areas?
Yeah, so I'm trying to do something new because I also had a break in the industry. So this is my thing. I would think that like at least for me, that continuing a PhD domain can also get a bit boring. That you did this for 6 years. If you continue this for the next 6 years, it might be a bit too much. So you would definitely want to find at least something that excites you and that's adjacent. And again, that's what I'm trying to do, like trying to do things that excite me and that I feel interested in. And yeah, we'll figure out if this works well.
Thank you for your answer. Yasaman, do you want to add to this? I kind of know your perspective. We recently talked, but do you want to share it with the audience?
Maybe I'll just add one important thing, and that is, as a PhD student, we kind of are taught to do everything by ourselves. So I'm basically want to perfectly write this, or even small things like purchasing lab equipment. So I'm the best one that can handle this, right? So we're not used to delegate responsibilities to others, right? But if you continue doing that as a kind of assistant professor, then you will have absolutely zero time of doing research, the thing that you love, right? So I think that was, at least for me, a little bit hard at the beginning, learning how to kind of give others responsibilities, like my students, like they can handle it by themselves, like I have to trust them, right? This was not easy, at least for me in the beginning, but that's how they can also learn faster and better and more efficient, right? So that's one thing. The other thing is, again, I want to emphasize like saying no as an early independent, in the maybe first 2-3 years of your work. It's really important, because I think as an assistant professor, I actually learned that your best commodity is your time. It's not about your money, how much funding you have, or how many students you have. It's just how much time you have, because you always come up with new ideas, and more than often is just you don't have time to explore them, and you kind of forget about them after a while. So I think that's how, I mean, the time management is absolutely critical.
So multiple people have mentioned time and time management, and that ties in with work-life balance. I'd only add or point out that, you know, there are lots of really good books on that, and you can learn best practices, and you can think about role models there too, about people who manage their time and manage work-life balance and things like that. It's something I think you have to actively work on.
Yeah, that really sums it. Thank you. So I'm going to ask a question to Philip now. What helped you establish yourself in the research community?
I would say, in short, really kind of making connections. And I mean, as was mentioned a couple of times, and I mean, which typically happens in conferences or in workshops. And I want to just add one thing there. I found it much easier to do that if I was at a venue where I gave a talk myself. And it doesn't need to be SIGCOMM'. It's fine if it's a workshop, because you start talking, and then afterwards, like, you walk around and people might have just approached you and you have something to talk about. So I think the very first SIGCOMM' I attended quite some time ago, I did not have a talk. I did not really know the community, and it was more a bit like, yeah, okay, I'm kind of walking around here. And it got much, much easier once I managed to, once you have your first talk, and then you can kind of start interacting with folks. And then, yeah, kind of really like foster these relationships. I found that, I mean, people are typically happy to mentor you, and very open to helping you and answering you questions. So just don't hesitate to reach out and to ask.
Thank you so much for this answer. Now this question is to all the panelists. In your experience, what is the best way to establish new collaborations as an independent researcher at different stages, given that you're all at different stages of this research career? Does anybody want to grab this question first?
Well, I think it's all about what Philip just said, right? It's going out and making connections with people, and sometimes you'll initiate them, and other times people may contact you, and it's more from their side. But as somebody also said earlier, if you're sitting alone in a dark closet, it's a lot harder for things like that to happen than if you're physically present. I guess I'll say also being physically present seems to help over something like Zoom, and hopefully we'll be out of Zoom mode soon. But it's certainly all about making connections.
Yeah, that's the, yeah, go ahead, Hannah.
So I also agree with what Philip and Jim, they both said. And just for early PhD students, I just want to tell them, don't be shy. Don't be the person that is sitting by themselves. Just go and, talk to people. They're very kind. They would mentor you. They would ask your questions. So, and you also, you can ask your questions as well. Just don't be shy.
Thank you so much for your viewpoint, Hannah. Does anybody else want to chime in? Professor Bonaventura?
No, I was wondering when we will take into account the questions on the Slack and on the chat, time-wise.
Yes, I was just gonna move to, this was the last question.
Okay.
If any of the panelists wants to discuss this, how to establish new collaborations as an early stage researcher.
Yes, I'll just add one thing, Tanya, that essentially we've talked a lot about making connections, and I found it quite hard to do that as a junior PhD student, because I'm more of an introvert. So going to a conference and talking to strangers was hard for me. And one strategy that I used was that I set a goal for myself that at every conference I'll have a 10-minute conversation with one new person outside my circle. And that was quite useful, because like gradually I knew, let's say, like 5 or 10 people, and given that they will like talk to someone else and I'm in that group, I'll also converse with them. So it like this, like connection building does not have to start at the first conference you go to, but just try to like take the first step, like talk to someone for 10 minutes, for example. That worked for me, but try to define a strategy that will work for you, because everyone has sort of a different personality. Some people find it harder to engage in conversation with strangers.
Yeah, that's an excellent viewpoint. Does anybody else want to add to it?
I want to add that it doesn't, those kind of connections that we've all been talking about don't just happen at conferences. You can make them happen intentionally. And so what I've often said to junior faculty, and when I was at NSF, I encourage people to talk to NSF program managers. So I see we have a question from Karen Sollins, who's a former, a wonderful researcher, former NSF program manager, and a wonderful person. I mean, these are people who are very happy to talk to you. And I remember when my chair told me, oh, I should go talk to my program manager at NSF, who was Darlene Fisher, but I didn't know her. And I thought, oh, here I am. I'm a junior professor. She doesn't even want to talk to me. And so I was scared to death to approach her, but I did. And she turns out she's a marvelous person, a wonderful person, and been my program manager for 30 years. And, I was encouraged to go talk to people at DARPA. And I figured DARPA ate faculty for breakfast. So I never quite got enough courage to go talk to a DARPA program manager until after I got tenure. But, Deepak says he's a little introverted. Well, everybody's a little introverted, right? And so, just screw up a little bit of courage and go talk to people. I think people like to talk to other people. So go out and do it.
Thank you so much for that answer. Although we have so many other questions, but we are running out of time. So we'll move to the audience questions. And I do see a lot of activity on the Slack channel. Okay, so on the top of my Slack channel, there's a question for Professor Kurozei that you mentioned that there are many books about time management. Is there a one that is focused on academia?
So there's not one that's focused on academia, but there is one that I've bought about 60 copies. So I've actually taught time management to faculty members and department chairs at UMass. It's called How to Get Control of Your Time in Your Life. It's a really old book, but it's still got a lot of really good tips. So I read a time management book every 6 months, right? And so that's a good one. And they're $6, and so I'd buy them 10 at a time and give them out to people for free. The Stephen Covey time management book is another really good one. So find one you like. I've got 15 of them on my shelf, and there are some that I like and some that are absolutely horrible. So it's a very personal thing.
Thank you so much for that answer. I hope it answers your question, Raphael. So there's another question: that is internship a must for student targeting a research scientist position after graduation?
I think it's useful to go elsewhere. So I think it's useful to go elsewhere than where they have studied and the lab where they do their research. So it's useful to move a bit, at least.
Thank you so much for that answer. I'm going to answer another question. Ask another question: how to balance our research vision so that it would be interesting for the community, but still shows our strength. Yasman, do you want to take this one up?
Can you repeat the question? Sorry.
So the question is how to balance our research vision so that it would be interesting for the community, but still shows our strength.
These two do not contradict each other. So you can do impactful research and also kind of have a bold research vision in the way that the community finds that interesting. So I think these two that can happen at the same time.
Yeah, I agree with that. That's a great answer. Thank you. So
maybe I can add something.
Definitely.
I think when you look at a research project or research vision or the topic on which you want to work, you have to look at what are your own skills. So are you good at building systems, analyzing systems, developing models, or whatever? So what are your own skills and your own passion? What are the skills and what are the unique skills of the lab or the university where you are? So where can you get some help if you need help? And whether you need data or whether you need hardware or systems to be able to run your research. And depending on what you have and what are your skills, then you can do some research, and there are other research that you cannot do. For example, in my group, we never worked on data centers, simply because we don't have data centers. We could do simulations of data centers, but this would never be accepted. So try to work on a niche where you are unique compared to others, and that combines the skills that you have and the assets that you have in where you are, and try to exploit these assets to be someone unique who is the only one who is able to do this kind of work.
Thank you so much for a comprehensive answer. That really sums it up. I have another question by Milind Kunjan. He says that he is in a different scenario. What would a panel's advice be to a working professional like him who has desire to go back to academia for a PhD? So he's asking, how do I approach, identify PhD program and an advisor? He has given his background a bit, that he has a master's in telecommunication and part of the emerging technology group working on Edge and 5G at T-Mobile. Does anybody want to take this one up?
I would say that basically, like being at a conference like SIGCOMM' is definitely the first step. They get to know different advisors that are working in the relevant area. Also check out like who else is publishing in, say, like related conferences, not just SIGCOMM', say MobiCom or like Mobisys, more related to edge computing and 5G. And once they have a set of advisors, definitely try to reach out. Because like as I said in the beginning, for every group there is a balance of people who we want to be like more experienced with certain skills, and if somebody is looking for the certain skill that that Milind has, that would like they would definitely respond and strike a conversation. So yeah, so they are on the right track by like coming to SIGCOMM' and attending the panel and talking to different people here. But like just repeat this process through like by looking at publications in other conferences and reaching out to people who publish there.
Thank you. That was an excellent answer. My final question, which is a kind of a repeat and the last one for the panel, is how do you express research interests without revealing them prematurely? How do you establish trust with people such as those who you meet at conferences? So there is one thing to be shy and another thing to be concerned. What are your thoughts on it? Professor Kurozei, do you want to take this one?
You know, I've never hesitated to tell anybody what I'm working on. I know, actually, when I was a grad student, I remember there were professors who told their grad students not to tell other grad students what they were working on, which I didn't think was right. And, you know, I think we're all bringing our own unique ideas and approaches to problems. So I just have never worried about that.
Yeah, also I would think that in systems, it's kind of hard to scoop. Like it takes a year to build the system. You're already working on it, and you are like, and our ideas are probably not that great that somebody else would like just give up their own ideas that they're working on and start pursuing our idea for like the next year of their life. It's just more, it's more about like creating collaborations and finding intersections as opposed to like giving out our ideas to somebody else.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. In any ways, you would have a head start on it, even if somebody wants to work on it. And maybe you can get early feedback on your work if you're doing something wrong, and you can get the feedback.
Yeah, don't miss any opportunity to get feedback from what you are doing, or getting collaborators.
Exactly.
Just
that sums it up.
Yeah, put yourself out there and don't be shy. Just go talk to people and don't, deprive yourself from any opportunity.
Thank you. So I see a lot more questions in the Slack channel, but since we are running out of time, we'll have to conclude our panel. I want to thank all our panelists for joining today and sharing their valuable experiences with the SIGCOMM audience. I would also like to thank our audience for participating in the panel discussion and asking really exciting questions. Thank you all and enjoy the rest of SIGCOMM'. Make most of it.
Thank you,
Thank you, Tanya. Thank you to you and the organizers.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.